At the luxury Hillcrest Country Club, a quiet black man stood at the gates, politely explaining he was invited as a +1. But before he could even finish his sentence, the bride herself stormed over and snapped, "We don't let strangers crash my wedding." Then she banned him on the spot. What she didn't know, this +1, was actually the billionaire CEO who owned the entire chain of resorts, including the one hosting her wedding. By the time she realized the truth, her dream wedding turned into a public disaster that would be remembered forever. Before we find out what happens next, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story already has your jaw dropping, make sure you hit that like button. The air at the entrance to Hillcrest Country Club was thick with a frantic electric energy. It was a symphony of controlled chaos, the kind that only very expensive events could produce. Sleek black cars with tinted windows purred up the winding driveway, one after another, depositing guests dressed in shimmering fabrics and sharp tuxedos. The afternoon sun glinted off polished chrome and expensive jewelry, creating 1,000 tiny, blinding stars. Photographers, a swarm of them, jockeyed for position, their cameras flashing like a summer lightning storm, capturing every practiced smile and elegant wave. The air smelled of money, a mixture of high-end perfume, exhaust fumes from luxury vehicles, and the freshly manicured lawns of the exclusive club. Valets in crisp white uniforms moved with practiced urgency, whisking cars away as soon as their occupants stepped onto the plush red carpet that led to the grand entrance. It was a parade of wealth and social status, and every person there knew their part to play. At the security gate, however, the perfect performance had hit a snag. A man named Marcus Reed stood patiently, a picture of calm in the swirling vortex of activity. He was dressed in a simple, understated gray suit that was impeccably tailored but deliberately modest. It didn't scream for attention like the designer labels worn by the other guests. He held a thick, cream-colored invitation in his hand. The name printed in elegant swirling calligraphy was not his own. It read, "Mr. Tom Willis and guest." A young security guard, barely out of his teens, was looking at the invitation, then back at Marcus, then at the list on his clipboard. His brow was furrowed in confusion. Another older guard stood beside him, arms crossed, his expression a mixture of suspicion and impatience. The line of cars behind Marcus's simple sedan was beginning to grow, and the muffled sound of an impatient horn could be heard. Marcus simply offered a polite, easy smile. He wasn't bothered by the delay. He wasn't intimidated by the scrutiny. He had faced far worse than a confused security guard. He tried to explain the situation in a low, calm voice. "My name is Marcus Reed," he said, his tone even, respectful. "I am here as the guest of Tom Willis. He is an employee of the Groom, Ethan Cole. I believe he is already inside." The young guard chewed on his lip. He looked at his list again, running his finger down the column of names. "I don't see a Marcus Reed here, sir," he said, his voice cracking slightly under the pressure. "And we have strict instructions, only names on the list." The older guard stepped forward, his posture aggressive. "Look, sir, if your name isn't on the list, you can't come in. It's a private event." Suddenly, the delicate bubble of wedding day bliss popped. A figure in a cloud of white tulle and raw silk descended upon them like a hawk. It was Brittany Cole, the bride. Her face, which had been perfectly made up for the cameras, was now twisted into a mask of pure fury. Her movements were sharp, her steps angry as she marched toward the gate, her wedding planner, a flustered woman named Mrs. Vaughn, trailing behind her, wringing her hands. "What is going on here?" Brittany's voice was high and sharp, cutting through the low hum of the crowd. "Why is there a line? Why are you holding things up?" Her eyes landed on Marcus, and her expression curdled from anger into outright disdain. She scanned his simple suit, his quiet demeanor, and made a snap judgment. He didn't belong. He was an imperfection in her perfectly curated day. Before Marcus could even repeat his explanation, before the guards could articulate the problem, Brittany pointed a finger at him, her diamond ring catching the light. "Who is this?" she demanded, not of Marcus, but of the security guards, as if he were an object, not a person. The young guard stammered, "Ma'am, he says he's a +1, but his name isn't on our list." Brittany let out a short, derisive laugh. It was a sound completely devoid of humor. "A +1? We don't let randoms wander into my wedding. I've spent a year planning this day, and no one is going to ruin it." She turned her venomous gaze directly on Marcus. Her voice dripped with condescension. "I don't know who you are, but you are not welcome here. This is a private event for friends and family, not a soup kitchen." A collective, quiet gasp rippled through the guests who were close enough to hear. They watched the scene unfold, a mix of shock and morbid curiosity on their faces. A few whispered to one another, their eyes darting between the furious bride and the calm, silent man. The photographers sensed the drama, and their lenses began to turn, capturing the ugly confrontation. Brittany, feeding off the attention, swelled with self-importance. She felt powerful, like a queen defending her castle from an intruder. She turned to the older guard. "Get him out of here. Escort him off the property right now. I don't want to see his face again." She smirked, a cruel, satisfied little smile that twisted her beautiful features into something ugly. She felt she had handled the situation perfectly, decisively protecting the integrity of her perfect day. Marcus Reed looked at her. His expression did not change. There was no anger in his eyes, no flicker of humiliation. There was only a deep, profound stillness, an unnerving calm that seemed to absorb her rage without reflecting any of it back. He simply gave a slow, deliberate nod. He lowered his gaze for a moment, then met her eyes again. In a voice that was barely more than a whisper, yet carried with absolute clarity, he said, "Congratulations, ma'am." Then, without another word, he stepped aside. He turned his back on the scene, on the whispering guests and the flashing cameras, and walked back toward his car with a quiet dignity that was more powerful than all of her shouting. Brittany watched him go, her smirk firmly in place. She had won. She had protected her wedding. She had no idea that she had just detonated a bomb in the middle of her own life. Inside the grand ballroom of the Hillcrest Country Club, Brittany was holding court. The confrontation at the gate was already being spun into a heroic tale of a bride protecting her special day. She moved through the clusters of guests, her massive white dress rustling like a field of dry leaves, a triumphant smile plastered on her face. To anyone who would listen, she recounted the story, embellishing it with each telling. "You should have seen it," she said to a group of her bridesmaids, her voice loud and theatrical. "This man, he just showed up, trying to talk his way in. He was holding up the whole entrance. I had to do something. I saved my own wedding from a party crasher." Her friends giggled and offered their support. "Good for you, Britt," one of them said. "You can't be too careful these days." Another added, "So bold of him to even try. Some people have no shame." The guests laughed along politely, sipping their champagne, but underneath the surface a current of unease was beginning to flow. Some who had witnessed the incident firsthand felt a prickle of discomfort. The man hadn't seemed like a threat. He had been polite, calm, and well-dressed, if not ostentatiously so. Brittany's reaction had felt excessive. It was cruel. The whispers started quietly, little murmurs that traveled from one table to the next like a ripple in a pond. They spoke of the bride's sharp tongue, her public display of arrogance. The story was spreading, but it wasn't the heroic tale Brittany was telling. On the other side of the room, near the service entrance, Liam Turner was trying to piece together what had actually happened. Liam was a junior hotel manager, young but sharp, with a keen eye for detail and a strong sense of right and wrong. The incident at the gate had set off alarm bells in his head. Part of his job was to ensure the smooth and seamless experience of every guest, and public confrontations were the opposite of that. He quietly pulled aside the young security guard, who had been at the center of the ordeal. The guard, still flustered, recounted the events. "He had an invitation, Mr. Turner," the guard explained, his voice low. "It said, Tom Willison guessed. He said his name was Marcus Reed. But the bride, she just shut it down. She didn't even let us verify it. Liam's frown deepened. Did you get a chance to check with Mr. Willis? No, sir. Mrs. Cole. I mean the bride. She demanded we remove him immediately. There was no time. A feeling of dread began to coil in Liam's stomach. This felt wrong. It wasn't standard procedure. He knew the Coles had spent a fortune on this wedding, but that didn't give them the right to treat people this way, especially if the man had a legitimate invitation. He thanked the guard and made a mental note to find Tom Willis and discreetly ask about his intended guest. Just then, the groom, Ethan Cole, finally arrived at the reception area. He was late, having been held up dealing with a last-minute issue with the groomsmen's tuxedos. He looked stressed, his face pale and his smile strained. His eyes scanned the room, a look of anxiousness about them. He spotted Brittany surrounded by her friends and made his way toward her. "Everything okay?" he asked, kissing her on the cheek. "I heard there was some kind of hold-up at the gate." Brittany waved a dismissive hand. "It was nothing, just some weirdo trying to crash. I handled it." Ethan's brow furrowed. "A crasher? What did he look like?" "Oh, I don't know," she said with a shrug. "Older guy, black, dressed in a boring gray suit. Looked like he could have been one of the drivers." Ethan's already pale face lost all its remaining color. A chilling stillness fell over him. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. He grabbed Brittany's arm, his grip tighter than he intended. "Gray suit?" he repeated, his voice a choked whisper. "Was he calm? Did he say who he was a guest of?" Brittany pulled her arm away, annoyed. "He said he was with Tom Willis. Honestly, Ethan, why are you so worked up about this? He's gone. It's over." But it wasn't over. For Ethan, the world had just tilted on its axis. He knew exactly who Tom Willis's +1 was supposed to be. He had spent weeks hoping, praying, that the man would actually show up. It was the ultimate honor, a sign of immense respect. That man was Marcus Reed, his CEO, the founder of the company where he worked, the man who had personally approved his last promotion, the man whose company, Reed Global Holdings, owned the entire Hillcrest chain of resorts, the man who was, in effect, paying for this very wedding through Ethan's generous salary and bonus. Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at his new wife, at her smug, self-satisfied expression, and a wave of nausea washed over him. The entire ballroom, with its glittering chandeliers and laughing guests, seemed to go silent. The music faded into a dull throb in his ears. He realized with a clarity that felt like a physical blow what Brittany had just done. She hadn't just turned away a guest. She had publicly humiliated the quiet, unassuming titan of industry who held his entire career, their entire future, in the palm of his hand. The name Marcus Reed was not one that appeared often in glossy magazines or on sensationalist news channels. He was not a man who craved the spotlight. In a world of flamboyant billionaires who built rockets and bought social media companies, Marcus Reed was an anachronism. He was a ghost, a whisper in the boardrooms where real power was exchanged. He was the founder and CEO of Reed Global Holdings, a sprawling international conglomerate with interests in luxury hospitality, technology, and sustainable energy. His wealth was vast, almost incomprehensibly so, yet he lived a life of deliberate simplicity. This quietness, this humility, was not an act. It was forged in the fires of a difficult past, a flashback, not of images, but of feelings, played in his mind. He remembered the sting of being overlooked, the sharp edge of prejudice. He remembered doors being closed in his face, not because of a lack of talent or ambition, but because of the color of his skin. He remembered the condescending looks, the dismissive tones, the low expectations that people had for him. He had been a young man with big dreams and an empty wallet, navigating a world that often judged the book by its cover. There was one particularly searing memory from his early 20s. He had been trying to secure funding for his first small tech startup. He had a brilliant idea, a solid business plan, and a passion that burned like a furnace. He had managed to get a meeting with a venture capitalist, an older, powerful man who listened to his pitch with a look of bored indulgence. At the end of the presentation, the man had leaned back in his leather chair and said with a dismissive wave of his hand, "Son, you've got some nice ideas, but you're not what we're looking for. Maybe try something smaller. A local business, perhaps." The unspoken message was clear. You don't belong in this league. That rejection could have broken him. Instead, it became his fuel. He vowed that day that he would build an empire so large, so influential, that no one would ever be able to dismiss him or anyone who worked for him again. But he also made another vow. He would never become the man in that leather chair. He would never let power corrupt him. He would never judge a person by their suit, their car, or the color of their skin. He would build his company on a foundation of respect, integrity, and merit. And he had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. Reed Global was known not only for its profitability, but also for its corporate culture. Marcus believed in what he called ground-level truth. He often visited his own hotels, resorts, and offices unannounced, dressed not as a CEO, but as an ordinary person. He would eat in the staff cafeterias, listen to the concerns of the janitors, and observe the daily operations from the perspective of the people who were actually doing the work. It was his way of staying connected, of remembering where he came from. That was why he had accepted Ethan Cole's wedding invitation. Ethan was a promising mid-level manager at one of his tech subsidiaries. He was bright, hard-working, and had shown great potential. When Marcus heard through the grapevine that Ethan was getting married at a Hillcrest resort, one of his own properties, he was pleased. His quiet co-worker, Tom Willis, had mentioned he was going and offered his +1 spot. Marcus saw it as the perfect opportunity. He could attend incognito, show his support for a valued employee, and perhaps get an unfiltered look at how one of his flagship properties handled a major event. He had told Tom he wanted to keep it simple. No fuss, no special treatment. He just wanted to be a regular guest. So he had driven himself in his modest sedan, worn his simplest gray suit, and presented himself at the gate, ready to quietly celebrate his employee's milestone. He had anticipated a quiet, pleasant afternoon. He had not anticipated a public shaming at the hands of the bride herself. As he sat in his car, parked in a quiet corner of the lot overlooking the ocean, he wasn't angry. He was something far more potent. Disappointed. The ugly scene replayed in his mind. The bride's sneer, her dismissive words, the whispers of the crowd. It wasn't the personal insult that bothered him. He had thicker skin than that. It was the principle of the matter. It was the casual cruelty, the arrogance born of privilege that he had fought against his entire life. And it was happening right here at a company he had built to be different. He had created Hillcrest Resorts to be beacons of hospitality, places where everyone, from the wealthiest client to the newest bellhop, was treated with dignity. Brittany's behavior was a betrayal of that core value. He looked out at the sparkling blue water. The lesson he had learned all those years ago in that venture capitalist's office echoed in his mind. Some people only understand power. They only respect what they can see. The fancy car, the expensive watch, the famous name. They are blind to the value of the person standing right in front of them. He knew then that this couldn't be ignored. An example had to be made, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. A lesson had to be taught. And, as the narrator might say, some lessons are best taught not with a shout, but with the deafening silence of consequences. Ethan grabbed Brittany's arm and pulled her away from the laughing crowd, dragging her into a small, secluded alcove near the restrooms. His face was a mask of sheer terror. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. "What did you just do?" Brittany yanked her arm free, her expression one of pure indignation. "What are you talking about? I was protecting our wedding. Don't you dare take that man's side over mine." "His side," Ethan let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. You think this is about sides? Brittany, that man wasn't a crasher. That was Marcus Reed. He said the name as if it were a sacred incantation, expecting it to have an immediate, powerful effect. But Brittany just stared at him, her face a blank canvas of confusion. Marcus Reed? Who is Marcus Reed? One of your boring work friends you forgot to invite? Ethan's hands went to his head, and he tugged at his hair in desperation. He couldn't believe her ignorance. He couldn't believe her complete lack of awareness. He's not my work friend, Brittany. He's my boss. He's not just my boss. He's the CEO of the entire company. He's the man who owns Reed Global Holdings. He saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes at the company name, but the full implication still hadn't landed. He had to spell it out for her. He lowered his voice, leaning in so no one else could hear. He owns Hillcrest. He owns this resort. The ground we are standing on belongs to him. The paycheck that is funding this entire ridiculous, over-the-top wedding comes directly from him. The color drained from Brittany's face. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The smug confidence, the arrogant smirk, it all evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed, wide-eyed look of horror. Her perfectly painted lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked as though she had been struck by lightning. "You're joking," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You have to be joking. That man, he looked like a driver. He was wearing a cheap suit." "It wasn't a cheap suit, Brittany," Ethan shouted, his control finally snapping. "It was a $5,000 bespoke suit designed to look understated. That's what he does. He's famous for it. He goes undercover to his own properties to see how they're run." The full weight of her actions crashed down on Brittany. She had not just been rude to a stranger. She had publicly humiliated a billionaire. Her billionaire. The man who held her husband's career and, by extension, her entire lifestyle, in his hands. Her mind raced, desperately trying to find a way out, a way to spin this. "Well, how was I supposed to know?" she stammered, her voice defensive. "You should have told me he was coming. You should have shown me a picture." "I did," Ethan shot back. "I told you my CEO might come as Tom's +1. I told you to be nice to everyone, but you were too busy being the queen of your own little drama to listen." Unseen by the frantic couple, Liam Turner had followed them. He had overheard the entire exchange, and his heart sank. The knot of dread in his stomach tightened into a cold, hard stone. So, the man the bride had berated and banished was the owner of the entire resort chain. The scale of the catastrophe was immense. He felt a wave of second-hand shame. This went against everything Hillcrest was supposed to stand for. Brittany's mind was now in full panic mode. Her first instinct was to fix it, to smooth it over with her charm. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely type. "What's his number?" "I'll call him. I'll apologize. I'll explain it was all a misunderstanding." Ethan snatched the phone from her hand. "Are you insane? You think a phone call is going to fix this? You just committed career suicide for me, and you think a quick, 'oops, my bad' is going to make it go away?" Brittany's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration and fear. Her perfect day was ruined. Her perfect future was in jeopardy. "Then you fix it," she screeched, her voice a shrill whisper. "He likes you. You're his rising star. Go find him and make him understand." But Ethan was just shaking his head, a look of utter defeat on his face. The foundation of his world had crumbled, and the cracks in his brand-new marriage were already beginning to show. He looked at the woman he had just married, her face contorted with panic and self-interest, and he felt a chilling realization. There was no fixing this. He knew Marcus Reed. The man was quiet, but he was not weak. He was fair, but he did not suffer fools or tolerate disrespect. What had been done could not be undone. The damage was absolute. Liam Turner walked away from the alcove. the angry, panicked whispers of the bride and groom fading behind him. His mind was racing. He was just a junior manager, a small cog in the vast machine of Reed Global Holdings. The corporate hierarchy was a towering skyscraper, and he was on the ground floor. Getting involved was risky. The safest thing to do would be to look the other way, to pretend he hadn't heard anything, to let the powerful people sort out their own powerful messes. It wasn't his problem. But as he walked through the opulent ballroom, past the carefree guests and the smiling staff, a profound sense of duty settled over him. He had witnessed a gross injustice. He had seen a good man treated with scorn and contempt simply because he did not look the part. And it had happened at his place of work, on his watch. To do nothing felt like a betrayal of his own principles. He thought about the values Hillcrest promoted in its employee handbooks: respect, integrity, service. They were not just words on a page to him. He believed in them. This was his chance to prove it. He made a decision. It was a quiet internal choice, but it felt momentous. He had to do something. He had to try to make it right. He excused himself from the reception floor and headed outside, hoping he wasn't too late. He found Marcus Reed's modest sedan still parked in the far corner of the lot. Mr. Reed was sitting in the driver's seat, the window down, looking out at the ocean. He wasn't on the phone, he wasn't fuming. He was just sitting there in a state of quiet contemplation. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. He was about to approach one of the most powerful men in the world. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and walked toward the car. He knocked gently on the open window frame. Marcus turned his head, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Reed, sir?" Liam began, his voice steadier than he expected. Marcus looked at him, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "You know who I am?" "I do now, sir," Liam said. "My name is Liam Turner. I'm one of the managers on duty today, and I wanted to apologize. Deeply and sincerely. For what happened at the gate. For how you were treated." He stood there waiting for a response, his apology hanging in the air. Marcus studied him for a long moment, his gaze sharp and intelligent. He seemed to be looking right through Liam, assessing his character, his motives. Finally, he gave a slight nod. "That wasn't your fault, son," Marcus said, his voice low and even. "You weren't the one who made the call." "No, sir," Liam persisted. "But it happened at my hotel, on my watch. It was a failure of our service and a failure of our values. What Mrs. Cole did was unacceptable, and I am truly sorry that you had to experience that." Marcus's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He saw the genuine remorse in the young manager's eyes. He saw the integrity. In a situation where most people would run and hide, this young man had sought him out to take responsibility. It was a rare quality. "I appreciate that, Liam," Marcus said, and he smiled for the first time. It was a small, genuine smile that transformed his face. "Thank you. Your integrity does you credit." Liam felt a wave of relief wash over him. "I'll go and set the record straight right now, sir. I'll tell the bride and groom who you are. We can fix this." Marcus held up a hand. "No," he said calmly. "That won't be necessary. The time for that has passed. Some things can't be fixed with a simple apology." He then looked directly at Liam, his eyes conveying a sense of gravity. "But you, Liam, you keep doing what you just did. Keep doing the right thing, especially when no one is watching. That's what matters." Marcus then reached for his phone. With Liam standing there, he made a brief, quiet call. His voice was calm, almost detached, betraying no emotion. "Hi, it's me," he said into the phone. "I need you to arrange something for me. A private event at the Hillcrest Country Club tomorrow. A luncheon. For the senior management team of the resort division. And a few special guests. I'll send you the list. Yes, that's right. Thank you." He hung up. He looked back at Liam, who stood there confused by the cryptic call. A private event? Special guests? Marcus offered him another small smile. Have a good afternoon, Liam. I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again soon. With that, Marcus started the engine of his car. He pulled out of the parking space and drove away, leaving Liam standing alone in the quiet lot. A trap was being set. A quiet, elegant, and inescapable trap. The wheels were in motion, but no one, least of all the bride, who was still celebrating inside, had any idea what was coming. Back in the ballroom, the champagne was flowing freely, and the band had started to play. The awkwardness of the gate incident had largely faded from the collective memory of the guests, replaced by the warm glow of alcohol and forced festivity. Brittany, having recovered from her initial panic, had slipped back into her role as the radiant, happy bride. It was a masterful performance of denial. If she acted like nothing was wrong, then nothing was wrong. That was her philosophy. She posed for photos, her smile wide and bright, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She laughed at the best man's toast, a sound that was just a little too loud, a little too sharp. She was a woman clinging to the wreckage of her perfect day, desperately trying to convince herself and everyone around her that the ship wasn't sinking. She found a group of her friends by the towering 7-tiered wedding cake. They were gossiping, and she joined them, eager for a distraction. "Can you believe the nerve of that man?" she said, picking up a conversation she had started hours ago. "Trying to crash a wedding like this? He probably just wanted a free meal and a glass of champagne." Her friends, loyal and oblivious, giggled in agreement. "Totally," one of them said. "You did the right thing, Britt. You have to protect your brand." Brittany seized on that phrase. "Exactly. My brand. This wedding is a reflection of us, of our standards. We can't just let anyone in." She was no longer just a bride. She was a curator of an exclusive experience, a gatekeeper of status. This narrative soothed her frayed nerves. It transformed her act of cruel prejudice into one of wise discernment. Ethan watched her from across the room, a pit of despair in his stomach. He had tried to talk to her again, to make her understand the gravity of the situation, the sheer magnitude of the disaster she had caused. But she had silenced him with a sharp, whispered command. "Stop it, Ethan, you're embarrassing me. Do not ruin this night." So he stood there, a prisoner in his own tuxedo, smiling for the cameras, while his future crumbled around him. He saw the falseness in her smile, the frantic energy behind her eyes. He saw a woman so obsessed with the appearance of perfection that she was completely blind to the reality of her own actions. He felt a profound sense of alienation from her, a chasm opening up between them that he wasn't sure could ever be closed. Every laugh, every toast, every dance felt like a lie. While Brittany and her friends mocked the man in the gray suit, that same man was miles away, leaving the grounds of the Hillcrest Country Club behind him. He drove not with anger, but with a quiet, steely resolve. He didn't look back. There was nothing left for him there today. The party would continue, the music would play, the cake would be cut. Brittany Cole would dance the night away, blissfully, arrogantly unaware that her world was about to be systematically dismantled. Pride, as the old saying goes, always dances before the fall. And Brittany's dance was a spectacular one, performed on the edge of a cliff she couldn't even see. Marcus Reed arrived back at his penthouse suite at a different Reed-owned hotel in the city center. The suite was vast and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the glittering city skyline. It was a space designed for quiet contemplation, a sanctuary from the noise of the world. He took off his suit jacket, loosened his tie, and poured himself a glass of water. He stood by the window for a long time, watching the endless streams of headlights on the streets below. He was not a man given to emotional outbursts. Rage was a blunt instrument, and revenge was a messy, unsatisfying affair. Marcus preferred precision. He believed in order, in systems, in consequences that were as logical and inevitable as gravity. What had happened today was not just a personal insult. It was a systemic failure. It was a crack in the foundation of the culture he had worked so hard to build. And a crack, if left untended, could bring the whole structure down. He picked up the secure, encrypted phone on his desk. It wasn't his personal cell, but a direct line to the highest levels of his organization. He dialed a number from memory. It was answered on the first ring. "Mr. Reed," a calm, professional voice said on the other end. It was David Chen, the regional director for all Hillcrest resorts in North America. "David," Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. "I trust you are having a pleasant evening." "Yes, sir. Is everything all right?" Chen sounded concerned. It was highly unusual for the CEO to call him directly, especially after business hours. "There was an incident today at the Hillcrest Country Club," Marcus began, his tone remaining perfectly level. "At the wedding of one of our junior executives, Ethan Cole." He proceeded to recount the events at the gate, not with a story of personal grievance, but with the detached, factual accuracy of an incident report. He described the confusion, the bride's intervention, and his removal from the premises. He left out no details, but he added no emotion. It was a surgical recitation of the facts. On the other end of the line, David Chen was silent, the silence of a man who feels the ground disappearing beneath his feet. He could scarcely breathe. The CEO of the company had been treated like a vagrant and thrown out of one of his own flagship properties. It was a nightmare scenario. "Sir, Mr. Reed, I am speechless," Chen finally stammered. "I am so sorry. I will launch a full investigation immediately. The general manager will be fired by morning. I will—" Marcus held up a hand as if Chen could see him. "No, David," he interrupted, his voice calm and steady, cutting through the other man's panic. "You will do nothing of the sort. This will be handled my way, quietly, precisely." He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. "I want you to schedule a confidential executive luncheon for tomorrow at the club. In the main boardroom. 12 o'clock sharp." "Yes, sir," Chen said, scrambling for a pen. "Who should be invited?" "You, the club's general manager, the head of security, and the events director. Also, I want the wedding planner, a Mrs. Vaughn, to be there, and the junior manager, who is on duty, Liam Turner." He paused again. "And, of course, the groom and bride, Ethan and Brittany Cole." A cold dread washed over David Chen. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a reckoning. "Understood, sir," he said. "What should I tell them the meeting is about?" "Tell them it is a standard executive review of the security incident that occurred at the Cole wedding," Marcus instructed. "Keep it vague. I want them walking in with their own assumptions." "Yes, sir. And will you be attending?" "I will be leading the meeting," Marcus said simply. He gave a few more precise instructions, then ended the call. He placed the phone back on the desk. There was no satisfaction in his expression, only a quiet resolve. The wheels of justice had begun to turn. They were silent, efficient, and utterly unstoppable. For Brittany Cole, the party was almost over. The real world was coming for her, and it would be arriving tomorrow at noon. The next morning, an official-looking email landed in Brittany's inbox. It was an invitation to a luncheon at the Hillcrest Country Club. The subject line read, "Confidential Executive Review." Brittany, nursing a slight champagne headache, read it with a sense of triumphant vindication. "See," she said, waving her phone in Ethan's face. "I told you it would be fine. They're holding a meeting about the security mishandling. They're probably going to apologize to us." Ethan read the email over her shoulder, but he felt none of her optimism. The names on the invite list, the regional director, the GM, the head of security, sent a chill down his spine. This was not a standard review. This was a high-level summons. "Brittany, this isn't a good thing," he warned, his voice low and anxious. "This is serious. Marcus Reed is going to be there." Brittany rolled her eyes, her arrogance fully restored after a night's sleep. Of course he'll be there. He's the CEO. He has to oversee things. This is our chance to explain what happened. I will defend my wedding and they'll see I was right. We'll probably get a full refund and a free vacation out of this for our trouble. She spent the next hour planning her outfit, choosing a sharp, professional-looking dress. She was preparing for a performance, a chance to reassert her status and control. She rehearsed her speech in her head, a carefully crafted narrative in which she was the victim, the hero who had protected her exclusive event from an unknown intruder. Liam Turner received the same invitation and was filled with a different kind of emotion, a deep, nervous confusion. Why was he, a junior manager, being summoned to a meeting with the top brass? He thought back to his brief conversation with Mr. Reed in the parking lot. I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again soon. A sense of foreboding and curiosity washed over him as he put on his best suit. At precisely 12 o'clock, they all gathered in the grand conference room at the club. It was an intimidating space with a long, polished mahogany table and towering windows that overlooked the golf course. The air was thick with tension. The senior managers from Hillcrest sat stiffly in their chairs, their faces grim. David Chen, the regional director, looked pale and stressed. Ethan sat beside Brittany, his head down, looking at his hands. Brittany, in contrast, sat tall and confident, a pleasant businesslike smile on her face. Liam found a seat at the far end of the table, feeling completely out of place. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the air conditioning. The board members from Reed Global, flown in that morning, filed in and took their seats without a word. Their presence amplified the tension in the room tenfold. Everyone knew something major was about to happen. Then, the double doors at the head of the room swung open. A man walked in. It was Marcus Reed. But this was not the man from the gate. This was not the quiet guest in the understated gray suit. This was the CEO. He wore a tailored black suit that radiated power and authority. A simple, elegant pin with the Reed Global logo was affixed to his lapel. His walk was confident, his presence commanding. He did not look at anyone, but everyone looked at him. A series of quiet gasps rippled across the room. The general manager's eyes went wide. David Chen seemed to shrink in his chair. Ethan lowered his head even further, as if hoping the table would swallow him whole. And Brittany froze. Her polite, confident smile dissolved. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes widening in stunned, horrified disbelief. It was him. The man from the gate. The man she had called a crasher. The man she had mocked and had thrown off the property. He was standing at the head of the table in front of the board of directors, radiating an aura of absolute control. The world tilted, the room seemed to spin, and every arrogant, cruel word she had uttered the day before came rushing back to her in a deafening torrent. The man she thought was nothing was, she now realized, everything. Marcus Reed walked to the head of the table and stood there for a moment, his calm, steady gaze sweeping across the room. He let the silence hang in the air, thick and heavy with unspoken fear and dawning realization. He didn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone was enough to command the complete and undivided attention of everyone present. He finally looked directly at Brittany, his expression not angry but deeply serious. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice calm and measured, filling the silent room. "Thank you all for coming. We are here today to discuss a serious lapse in the values that this company and this establishment are supposed to represent." He gestured to a large screen on the wall. "If you would all direct your attention here." With a click of a remote, the screen flickered to life. It was security footage from the front gate from the previous day. The video was crystal clear, the audio sharp. The entire room watched in horrified silence as the scene played out. They saw Marcus, polite and patient. They saw the confused guards. And then they saw Brittany, storming toward the gate, her face a mask of rage. They heard her sharp, condescending voice ring through the conference room speakers. "We don't let randoms wander into my wedding." The words echoed in the tense silence. They heard her call for security to escort him out. They saw her smug, satisfied smirk as Marcus walked away. The footage was damning, irrefutable. It was a cold, hard replay of her cruelty. When the video ended, the screen went black. Marcus turned his attention back to Brittany. Her face was ashen. The confident woman who had walked into the room was gone, replaced by a trembling, terrified shadow. "Mrs. Cole," Marcus said, his voice still quiet, yet carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "On what basis did you make the determination that I did not belong at your wedding?" Brittany opened her mouth, but only a dry, croaking sound came out. She swallowed hard, trying to compose herself. I didn't know who you were," she stammered, her voice a desperate whisper. "It was a misunderstanding. The security. They were confused. I was just trying to protect my event." Marcus listened patiently, his gaze unwavering. "You are correct. You did not know who I was. But my question was not about my identity. My question was about my humanity. What was it about me, a man with a valid invitation, that led you to the immediate conclusion that I was a random who needed to be removed?" He was dissecting her actions with surgical precision. He wasn't accusing her of being a bad person. He was forcing her to confront the ugly prejudice behind her decision. Brittany's mind was scrambling. Every excuse she had rehearsed now seemed pathetic and transparent. Your name wasn't on the list," she said weakly, grasping at straws. "The invitation said Tom Willison guest. We cannot know who every guest is. It was a security precaution." "A security precaution," Marcus repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "So your security protocol is to publicly humiliate anyone whose name you don't recognize. Is that the standard of hospitality at Hillcrest?" He turned his gaze to the general manager, who visibly flinched. The question hung in the air, an indictment of the entire establishment. He then turned back to Brittany. "Let's be honest, Mrs. Cole. You took one look at me, at my face, at my simple suit, and you made a judgment. You decided I was not important enough to be treated with basic human courtesy." Her eyes filled with tears of panic. She finally, truly, understood. The man she had dismissed as a driver, as a freeloader, was the billionaire owner of the entire empire. The power dynamic had been inverted so completely it was dizzying. She had held all the power at that gate yesterday. Today, in this room, she had none. "Please," she whispered, the tears now streaming down her face. "I am so sorry. It was a terrible mistake. I was stressed. It was my wedding day." The board members watched her, their faces like stone. They were not moved by her tears. They saw a liability, a walking PR disaster whose actions had insulted their leader and threatened the core brand of the company. Marcus let her apology hang in the air unanswered. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't offer forgiveness. He simply looked at her, and in his calm, unwavering gaze, she saw her own reflection. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to rage. He just needed to hold up the mirror. "Disrespect," Marcus said, his voice dropping to an almost confidential tone, though everyone in the room heard it as a shout, "is a mirror. It doesn't tell you anything about the person being disrespected. It tells you everything about the person doing the disrespecting. It shows who we really are." In the crushing silence that followed, Brittany Cole finally understood that her perfect life was over. The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus Reed let his final words settle, allowing the full weight of their meaning to land on everyone present. He then shifted his attention from Brittany to the rest of the room. His tone became brisk, decisive, the voice of a CEO making executive decisions. "The events of yesterday have highlighted several serious issues that will be addressed immediately," he announced. He looked at Ethan, who had not lifted his head from his hands. "Ethan Cole," Marcus said, his voice not unkind but firm. "You are a talented employee, and I do not believe you share your wife's values. However, a severe lack of judgment was demonstrated. Effective immediately, you will be transferred to our ancillary branch in Omaha, Nebraska. You will remain there pending the results of a full internal review of your conduct." Ethan nodded, mutely, not daring to look up. It wasn't a firing, but it was a clear and significant demotion, a professional exile. Brittany gasped, looking from her husband's slumped form to Marcus, as if to protest. But no words came. The consequences were just beginning. Marcus then turned his gaze back to Brittany. "As for you, Mrs. Cole," he said, his voice now cold and impersonal, "you are hereby blacklisted from any and all Reed Global properties for life. Any reservations or memberships you hold are terminated, effective immediately." He paused, then delivered the final crushing blow. "I have also instructed our media and marketing departments to sever all ties with you. Any event sponsorships, brand ambassadorships, or partnerships you have that are connected to any of our subsidiary companies are now void." Brittany's world imploded. Her entire life, her social standing was built on her image, an image largely funded and supported by companies that, she was just now realizing, were all under the Reed Global umbrella. She wasn't just losing access to fancy hotels, she was being erased. The woman who mocked a man for looking ordinary now wished for nothing more than to disappear completely. Whispers erupted around the table. The board members nodded in grim approval. This was a decisive action, a necessary one to protect the brand's integrity. Finally, Marcus's eyes fell on Liam Turner, who had watched the entire proceeding with a mixture of awe and terror. "Mr. Turner," Marcus said, and his voice softened. Liam sat up straighter, his heart pounding. "Sir?" "Yesterday," Marcus continued, "in a situation where it would have been easier to do nothing, you chose to do the right thing. You showed integrity, loyalty to our company's values, and a sense of personal responsibility. These are the qualities I look for in a leader." The room was silent, all eyes on the young junior manager. "The current general manager of this club will be reassigned," Marcus announced. "The position is now vacant. I am offering you the role of senior general manager effective next week. I trust you will ensure that every single person who walks through those gates is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." Liam was stunned. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply nodded, overwhelmed. In a single hour, one person's arrogance had led to their complete downfall, while another's quiet integrity had led to their meteoric rise. It was a perfect, brutal, and just rebalancing of the scales. The meeting was over. Marcus Reed gave a curt nod to the board and walked out of the room without a backward glance. The managers began to file out, leaving Ethan and Brittany alone at the long, polished table in the silent, cavernous room. The reckoning was complete. It didn't take long for the story to escape the confines of the boardroom. Within hours, it was everywhere. An anonymous board member, perhaps, or a manager in the room, leaked the details to a society blogger. From there, it spread like wildfire across the internet. The security footage, somehow copied, became a viral sensation. Clips of Brittany's haughty dismissal of Marcus, juxtaposed with photos of him as the powerful CEO, were shared millions of times. The story was irresistible, a classic tale of hubris and comeuppance for the digital age. The internet, acting as a global jury, delivered its verdict swiftly and unanimously. The comment sections were a tidal wave of condemnation for Brittany and praise for Marcus. "That's what happens when you judge people by their status instead of their character," one comment with thousands of likes read. Another said, "She wasn't protecting her brand, she was exposing it, and it's ugly." The hashtag #Hillcrest, humbled, trended for 3 days straight. Marcus Reed was lauded as a hero not for his wealth but for his restraint. He didn't yell, he didn't scream, he just let her bury herself, handled it like a true boss, a popular tweet declared. His quiet dignity in the face of her loud arrogance had become a masterclass in wielding power with grace. For Brittany, the fallout was catastrophic and immediate. The brands that hadn't been under the Reed Global umbrella dropped her anyway, terrified of being associated with her toxic public image. Her social media was flooded with so much hate she was forced to delete her accounts. The friends who had giggled along with her at the wedding suddenly stopped answering her calls. She had become a social pariah overnight, a living cautionary tale. The public humiliation was absolute. The person who had feared a stranger might tarnish her perfect image had single-handedly destroyed it in a way no party crasher ever could. The day after the meeting, Ethan quietly filed for an annulment. The papers cited irreconcilable differences, but the truth was much simpler. He had looked at his bride and seen a stranger, someone whose values were so fundamentally opposed to his own that he could not imagine building a life with her. He had nearly married someone who valued image over integrity, status over love. The incident had been a harsh, painful, but ultimately clarifying moment. He accepted the transfer to Omaha, seeing it as a chance to start over, to rebuild his career and his life away from the wreckage of his brief, disastrous marriage. Back at the Hillcrest Country Club, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. A new sense of purpose and humility permeated the staff. The story of what had happened had become a legend, a powerful reminder of the company's core values. The staff now treated every guest, from the wealthiest celebrity to the most unassuming visitor, with a newfound reverence and respect. They looked at each person and wondered, could this be another Marcus Reed? And Marcus himself? He remained as humble and understated as ever. A week after the incident, he visited the club again, this time arriving through the front gate without issue. He wasn't there to gloat or to inspect. He was there to have lunch with his new senior general manager, Liam Turner. He thanked Liam again for doing the right thing when it mattered most, reinforcing the simple, powerful lesson that true character is revealed not when the boss is watching, but when you think no one is watching at all. Months passed. The viral storm subsided, leaving behind a changed landscape. Under Liam Turner's dedicated leadership, the Hillcrest Country Club was thriving. It had become known not just for its luxury, but for its genuine, unpretentious hospitality. The story of the bride and the billionaire CEO had become a part of the resort's identity, a defining moment that had reshaped its culture from the top down. Liam had implemented new training programs for all staff, centered on the core principles of empathy, respect, and dignity. The first slide of every presentation was a simple quote from Marcus Reed: "Everyone deserves to be treated like a CEO." Marcus, true to his word, had moved on, but he hadn't forgotten the underlying issue that the incident had exposed. It wasn't just about one arrogant bride. It was about the societal pressure and obsession with status that created people like her. It was about a world where the value of a wedding was measured by its cost, not by the love it was meant to celebrate. He decided to do something about it. In a move that once again captured the public's admiration, Reed Global Holdings announced the establishment of the Celebration Fund. It was a new charitable foundation, and its first project was launched in Brittany's hometown. The fund's mission was simple: to provide grants and resources to help young, deserving couples afford beautiful weddings without the crippling debt or the pressure to project an image of wealth. It was a quiet, constructive act of grace. It wasn't about rubbing salt in Brittany's wound. It was about healing the kind of societal sickness that had created her. One sunny afternoon, Marcus revisited Hillcrest. He walked the grounds not as a CEO making an inspection, but as a man at peace. Liam, who had grown into his new leadership role with confidence and grace, accompanied him. They walked past the front gate, the scene of the infamous confrontation, now just a quiet entrance on a peaceful day. They saw a young couple, clearly not from the usual wealthy clientele, taking photos by the grand fountain. They were laughing, holding hands, their joy simple and pure. They were one of the first recipients of the Celebration Fund. Marcus watched them for a moment, a genuine smile on his face. He had turned a moment of ugly disrespect into a legacy of kindness and opportunity. He had shown that true power wasn't in punishing your enemies, but in lifting others up. The story was coming to a close. The arrogant had been humbled, the virtuous had been rewarded, and a quiet lesson had been taught to anyone who was willing to listen. In a world obsessed with status, with a constant need to show off and look down on others, true power is shown not in how you rise, but in how you treat those you think are beneath you. It's measured not by the noise you make, but by the quiet dignity with which you carry yourself. The screen fades to black as Marcus Reed, the humble billionaire, turns and walks into the warm sunlight, his stride calm and purposeful, a man who had faced down arrogance not with anger but with the unshakable power of his own integrity. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.